I'd like to call this meeting to order. First on the agenda is to recognize some people. The boys' Nordic ski team. And Steve, it looks like you have something to show us before we recognize these boys.
14-second video because I'm always super proud of what they do besides win. And one of the things that the ski team does is we go help run a whole day of the Special Olympics, and I mean really run it. And so I have this one video that's just awesome. I just wanted to show you that because we have a ton of really fast kids. A couple of the kids you saw in there were in the top 10 at state meet and just wonderful skiers, but they're also just awesome humans. So, and they do a great job at Special Olympics, and I just wanted you to see that. So they represent us super well. We appreciate it.
Oh. Thank you for that work. It's important work to get not only just to give back, and the way that you give back shows a lot about your character. So thank you very much for doing that.
Do you want me to help do certificates?
Yes, if you would like.
Where
I've got them right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The first one that the first one that I would like to come up had his picture in the paper yesterday, Luke Bartel. And one of the things, there's a big article about him, and I'm just going to read one paragraph. It says, Bartel already had the work ethic. This winter, the results showed he figured out the efficiency. The junior finished second in both the Class B Classic and freestyle races, helping to lead the Black Bears to the state championship. For his performance, Bartel is the Kennebec Journal Boys Nordic Skier of the Year. William Colvin.
Oh, he's at lacrosse practice.
Okay.
I'll preview him for you. Help I know at practice.
Gabriel Fine. Yeah, yeah. And the reason we're calling these people up is because they won the state championship, the Nordic Ski Team 2018 Class C State Championship. I don't think I said that, but anyway, Colin Firth. Connor.
He gets that a lot. It's not just you.
You should have heard the goof up last thing. Congratulations. Connor, yes. Dylan Getchell.
Still in here?
Nathan Janelle. Mark McLaughlin.
No?
Carter McFedrin. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Brady Stockwell. Bryce Trefethan.
Thank you.
Ethan Watts. Whoops. He's supposed to pass it. Congratulations. Tate Mandel.
Congratulations.
And two people led these guys all through the year. First one, Coach Steve DeAngelis. Yeah. And Coach Kathy Dupree.
Oh, it's so fun.
And Kathy.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just wiped this.
Well,
That was me. Hold on, I'm gonna keep it.
and I'll give all of these.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Also, in the newspaper during the past 2 days, 2 girls were pictured. The first one is Laura Parent. And again, there's a whole big, long article about her, and if you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. I'm just going to read one paragraph again. She said, "Racing mentally was a little difficult this season. Halfway through the season, I had to take a step back and ask myself what I'm really racing for, and evaluate what I'm doing and where I want to be. I got into a better mentality after that. With that improved mindset, Parent went back to being one of the state's best Nordic skiers. The senior placed 4th in the classical and skate races at the Class B championships, leading Maranacook to a 3rd-place finish. For her performance, Parent repeated as the Kennebec Journal Girls Nordic Skier of the Year." That was in yesterday's newspaper. In today's newspaper, Katie Ide. And again, there's a long article about her, so go back and read it if you haven't. But in the end, it worked out for Ide. The sophomore finished 4th in the Class B slalom state championships, and 4th in the Kennebec Valley Athletic Conference Slalom Championships to earn Kennebec Journal Girls Alpine Skier of the Year honors. So congratulations to both Katie and Laura, and of course Luke Bartel for their accomplishments. All right. Are there any citizens' comments? Okay. And any additions to the
I have none.
agenda? So, first action item is the approval of the minutes of March 21st.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes from March 21st, 2018.
It's been, the motion has been made and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed or abstentions? I didn't see any. Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion that we accept the lease purchase agreement from Androscoggin Bank for the purchase of a bus.
Second.
Okay. And do you have anything that you want to add about that?
In your packets, there's an explanation, and there were 2 proposals that were received, and Androscoggin Bank came in at the lowest rate. So I do recommend that you accept that motion.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of giving the lease agreement to Androscoggin Bank? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, I didn't see his hand. All right.
Up already?
Okay. And now we'll move into the budget workshop. During the workshop, we have been given a green sheet in the past that talks about the procedure that we will be using. We will raise hands, and I will recognize you. Try in the order in which you raised your hands. All board members should have a chance to ask questions before any member has a second turn. Once all the board member questions are answered, then we'll recognize public, and we've asked that anyone who wants to speak from the public to please sign the sign-in sheet at the back. And then we will go, once we will have a board discussion time again. So,
Updates. There has been some movement on LD 17, which is the bill to restore school-based health center funding. It has been classified as a non-emergency bill, and it appears that because of this, the funding for this year has been eliminated, but the funding hopefully will be restored for next year if it passes over a few hurdles that it has left. And Shanna Bellows is keeping us posted on what's going on with that. So it's looking really good, so that's great. We were able to order several items that were originally included in the FY19 budget, so we were able to reduce that budget by 0.06% or $10,313. So that is on page 1, a new general fund summary reflecting that decrease. On page 2, you have the revised revenue sheet that which is based on the revised expenditure budget. On page 3, you have the revised local dollar calculation, again based on that reduction. And then page 4 shows the budget progression to date. And we always keep track of each change that's made. Page 5 shows a summary of the budget changes, and page 6 shows the total budget reductions to date of $388,500 as we continue to work through the budget. We have received the needs assessment report from Oak Point Architects. It arrived today around 4 o'clock. At the very end, there is a recommendation summary, which has been handed to the members of the facility committee, and we're in the process of scheduling a meeting of the facilities committee next week to go over that. It came, like I said, it came around 4 o'clock today, and I just really haven't even had a chance to look through the summary really quickly. There wasn't anything that I noticed that was outstanding, but, again, we haven't had time to study it, so we'll be looking at that hopefully at the beginning of next week. We are hoping to hear about our health insurance increases this week or next week, and we'll make adjustments accordingly. You'll remember that we started off at 10%, and we are now down to we've reduced it to 7%. We are still working on the budget. We believe that we can find another $50,000 worth of projects that we can do this year in order to decrease the FY19 budget, and that in addition to hopefully health insurance decreases will bring us hopefully below the 5% increase mark. So that's really what we're going for. So that's really it.
On the budget decreases, the $10,000, is that listed in here?
It is.
Any particular, I'm sure it's probably in several places.
Are you looking at page 5?
Yep.
Okay, so, yeah, if you look down under budget decreases, you'll see $11,445. So that's a change, and then, yeah. And then up at the top with the health benefits, that's down a bit more to, that's a change. It's up, actually, yeah.
Okay, so one's up and one's down.
That reflects the central office changes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all
That
right.
was $406,739, so it's up a bit.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions? Alex?
I was curious, a parent brought to my attention, in the high school industrial arts center, there's an air compressor that is like 40 years old and it's falling apart, and they're wondering if we could do something to replace that.
It's probably,
Pass that on to Sean.
it is probably in,
Oh, it's a topic.
for IA, okay.
Yeah, I was
It
just
will not
wondering-
be in the
I was
facility.
wondering if we could put that into the budget.
I don't know if that was not included in the budget request. Do you want to make a motion?
Okay, I make a motion
I
that,
don't know how much that would be.
I make a motion that we replace the air compressor in the industrial arts center.
Is there a
How
se-
big is it?
How big's the air compressor? I think it affects several different equipment in the industrial arts, including plasma, the plasma torch, welding, and a couple other equipment.
Before we make, before you make a motion about that, let's investigate
Okay.
and find out whether or not it does need to be replaced and what the recommendation of the teacher would be. I feel uncomfortable
Yeah.
adding something that has not been added already, has not been recommended from anyone. So we,
Did you find it in these pages by any chance?
The
Right.
air compressor?
It'd be
No.
equipment.
it's equipment
No.
Yeah, it wouldn't be in there.
for a program. I assume the industrial arts program?
It would be under the industrial arts department.
Yeah. So
So-
I would feel very uncomfortable having a motion on the floor about that until we have have investigated that.
So why don't we just put it on the Wednesday, because we meet on Monday, right?
No, it has nothing to do with facilities. So it's a piece of equipment that's used in the IA program.
So we'll just wait for the recommendation of the teacher. Okay. I'm good with that.
Okay.
I rescind my motion.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Yes, Donna?
So normally, when we're developing the budget, the teachers bring their requests to administration, and that's passed on and included in the budget. So just a little bit of history on that.
Other questions, discussion? Jeremy?
Can somebody remind me, I remember last week we talked about how the proposed reserves budget was going from 500 to 600,000. I know we talked about this, I just cannot remember where that $100,000 came from.
We had a couple positions that weren't filled. There were 2 at Manchester that weren't filled, and then there was a 3rd position that was filled by an ed tech and not a teacher, the math integrationist position. Also, there were some positions where people left who were of higher on the scale, and they left, and we hired people who were lower on the scale, so there was a difference in their salaries. So that's where that came from. It doesn't, when you're talking salaries, it doesn't take long to come up with 100,000, so.
So for all intents and purposes, that's one-time money? We expect that to be expended next year, in theory?
So that'll be carried forward
Right.
into next year, and yes, that's included in our revenues for our spending.
Sean?
Well, are we taking motions on, is that kind of where we're at, or what
We
are
are-
you ready for us to do?
We are discussing the budget, and if you have a motion that you would like us to consider, we can certainly do that.
Okay. Well, I have one I'm ready to do right at this moment.
Okay?
I guess the $10,000 for sports uniforms, I think I get sports teams, my kids are very active at a young age in sports, but when it comes to saving money, I mean, we did, at the request of, not this board, the members, cut the fee for students to play sports. I'm not quite sure I got the information that got more people to play sports or not, but anyway, I guess at this time I'd be willing to, I'm gonna make a motion to cut that 10,600.
Okay. Discussion? 10,600, yeah?
The reason why that's in there, Sean, and you know, is because as your child goes up in sports and through the school system, the fundraising that is required at the high school is crazy. And it makes parents go nuts. So they were talking about a way to not fill the gap, but to bridge the gap a little bit, and whether the school district had an involvement in that. So that's where, I mean, $10,000 isn't a ton of money going to that, but I can understand if we're talking about reducing the taxpayer budget, $10,000, if that's where you draw the line, I can understand that. But I just think we have a lot more waste in this budget than that, just that 10,000. So I'm not going to oppose you, but that's where the thinking is from, is the amount of fundraising.
Any other discussion? Sean?
I mean, I would be open to maybe having a lower fee and have that money go to uniforms, but, I mean, it was voted at the meeting last time to remove all fees, so I would be open to that, and but, I mean, my kids play sports now, and I pay a lot of money, I mean.
Any other discussion? David?
I think we need to consider it on both sides. sports teams, the non-team sports are, for many of us, we're aware that those are a part of the education that support the students, that make them better able to perform in their athletic, not in their scholastic activities and their work. And where we can make a contribution, I think it's worth considering it. Whether that's the right amount or the right way, we can discuss. But here, the parents, both for their kids and for the general school and population, are putting in a huge effort already. I think it was right to at least talk about and think about making a contribution towards supporting their efforts. As was mentioned, there's a lot of effort already being put in, and money, by those families.
Yep. Anything else, Alex?
So this $10,600, it's, the uniforms are for school-sponsored sports. So that would include what sports?
Most of the sports
Most of the
except
sports,
for
not
football and
not
lacrosse
Okay.
and ice hockey. Other questions? Wendy?
The coach was talking about the uniforms, and is there a great need right now to get new uniforms? I can't quite remember what he said about that, but is this a great need right now?
Yes.
So Al said that he would like to start a rotation and every year purchase new uniforms for a different team.
So does the uniform stay in the school? And passed on to the next kid?
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to cut $10,600 for athletic uniforms from the budget. Are we ready to take a vote?
So, no, I'm not ready.
Okay. All right.
So the people that don't play athletics have no uniforms,
That's correct.
and they benefit nothing to say, hey, I'm from Maranicook when they go out. I don't know. That's something that the other side of this coin.
Adam?
I mean, again, I think this was more of a big picture thing from Al, trying to just change the fundraising culture at the high school, just to move a little bit onto and I understand if the budget, if that's, I completely understand that not being something that needs to be fixed right now with other stuff. I would just say that at some point, as a board, we're going to have to talk about what the school's responsibility is with that fundraising culture at both the high school and middle school.
So let me ask you this question, Adam. What about the music department that go out and perform an ensemble somewhere representing? I believe they wear their own clothes, right? Dressed up. Those families pay a lot for dress clothes when they play an ensemble.
Kathy?
I just want to say that I'm looking at the reductions already. When I see that teachers are giving up books and supplies for the classroom, I think $10,000 could go a long way in the classroom, but they've given that up. And I agree that maybe we should look at not doing that this year.
Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor of cutting the $10,600 from the budget? Against, opposed? Okay. Did you get that, Donna? 8-1. With David, yeah, David. Okay. Okay, my papers are getting,
I have another question.
yeah.
Just a question at this point. So the total, the budget's going up as of right now is roughly 5%, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I know that there was one other, and I'm not finding it from last time. I'm sorry.
Are you looking at this?
But yeah. The high school ed tech, an item to consider, which was the top priority, or the top thing to cut, reduced to half full-time, half FTE. I'm not sure if we're ready to talk about that. Yes,
Not about that, but if somebody
Okay.
wants to talk about that, I have something.
okay.
I know this isn't on the priority list to cut, but I would like a reminder regarding the elementary principal and the justification for that. Thank you.
So the proposal is to have a principal, full-time principal at Reedfield, full-time principal at Manchester, and a principal going between Mount Vernon and Wayne. Right now, our principals are pulled in two directions. When they're not in their buildings, the teachers have to pick up the slack basically and handle things that happen. I know that between Mount Vernon and Manchester, Janet was running back and forth this week. There were situations at both schools that she needed to handle, and you can only be in one place at once, but at a time. But there is an issue with that, and the needs of the students that we have really demands more attention. And teachers are being pulled out of classes, being pulled away from their intervention duties because they're handling the issues in the classrooms.
At each of the schools, is there a head teacher that is designated to handle those issues?
There are lead teachers, but again, they're being pulled out of their classrooms.
Kathy?
I just wanted to say that I think that one of the key issues here is the strong leadership that we have in this district that's been able to bring us to the point that we are. If you look back where we were 10 years ago and where we are now, there's so much improvement. And I think a piece of that is from the strong leadership that we've had from superintendents right down to the principals. And my concern that is if we don't do something to help them and support them by adding another person, they're going to be burnt out and we're not going to have that strong leadership that we continue to need to keep moving our district forward.
Jeremy?
Can somebody put their fingers relatively quickly on where our school population is in terms of decreasing or increasing across the elementary schools?
So we're up 22 students over last year. Are you looking long-term?
Well, I guess, you know, I'm very supportive of Manchester getting its own principal. I'm horribly biased because I have 3 young kids who will be a part of it. So I would like them to have their own principal, and I'll say that up front. So one of the things that would help me better inform my vote, although I think I'm already there, would just be determining, are we seeing an uptick in school population or a reduction?
Right now, we're on the uptake. So we're not up, here's our sort of timeline. And we're not up as far as we were in FY04, but we are, looks like we hit the downswing and we are on the upswing. And again, there's 22 more students this year than there were last year, so.
And when we were at the 04-ish levels, did Manchester have its own principal, or has this always been a shared scenario in the district? Does
That was
anybody know?
before my time, so. You have history,
Yeah.
Bridget has history.
Bridget,
I don't want to talk into the mic.
Oh,
The first year that Manchester did not have a full-time principal was 2009-10, I believe. Up until then, they always had a full-time principal.
in fact, all of the elementary schools had a full-time principal up before that time.
Wayne sometimes had a combined position, like a principal and Title I teacher, or a principal and a guidance counselor or something. But, and then eventually Mount Vernon and Wayne did share one.
Right.
But as EPS kept tightening up and state funding kept going away, we started merging those together. Sorry. But I think 2009, it was the first year that we became an RSU, was the first year that Manchester did not have a full-time principal. Probably Reedfield, too.
Reedfield had a full-time principal, but I was also curriculum and assessment coordinator.
Yes.
So,
And I think Rick did some PDC work, too. So
yes,
He was at the school full-time, but only like an 80% principal
right,
and 20% PDC coordinator.
right, right.
and at one point, I believe they had a teaching principal at Mount Vernon. I think Sarah Caban was acting as principal and she was teaching there, so.
Sean?
So to be clear, when they had a full-time principal, they were doing other,
Not always.
Other
not
thi-
always, is that?
As we began to
Okay.
cut back on administration, they began to pick up other things.
Okay.
I was always assessment as well as principal, and Reedfield at that time was the largest school. Now, Sean?
Well, okay, I'm just going to tell you where I'm at. I can't and will not support a 5% increase. I mean, I think that's a lot to ask. I think probably a 3% increase, 3.5% increase is reasonable. When you look at this sheet, it's pretty clear where the big nuggets are. We've been told, my understanding is, from Mr. Meserve, is we basically, reading between the tea leaves, you probably have to have this school nurse. If you have a student, I know I'm not an expert in special ed law, but I did talk to folks, and if a student's required to have something, they have to have it, and if they don't, I did read the handout, they probably could sue the district. I don't know if they would do that or not. So there's $90,000 I believe we have to have. The social studies teacher, if we don't have, our kids are going to be at a disadvantage. I mean, I don't want to burn anyone out. I think my kid's school principal is great. Mr. Boston is wonderful. But a 5% increase is hard to swallow, so. And I don't know, unless someone wants to explain maybe one of those other things we don't need or could justify how one is more important. I am not there.
Kathy?
I agree with Sean that I think a 5% increase is a lot, and I'd like to see it less than that. I do have a question about the high school social studies teacher myself. As a member of the curriculum committee, we just recently looked at all the awesome work that the social studies teachers have done, K through 12, and I know that they're really working hard. And one of the things that I was really impressed with that they're doing is looking at the standards and looking at the cross-cutting standards. So some of those social studies standards can be met in other areas. So I'm wondering, what those standards are that can be met in other areas. There are things like, I had them written down, but I can't remember, but there are certain standards that you can meet in other content areas. So my thinking was, at this point, with this budget, with the creative staff that we have at the high school, would it be possible, and I think it would be, because I know a lot of those staff people they work really hard and they're very creative, to really look at where some of those social studies standards can be met in some of the other content areas. And I was also thinking the same thing about the ed tech at the high school, about how maybe we could look at study halls a little differently if we need some of those teachers to be meeting with kids instead of monitoring study halls. I know we did some things at the middle school in the past that were pretty creative around study halls and how we could really focus in on some of the kids that really need the focus. So I'm really kind of questioning those two positions right now.
At this point, it sounds like we have two things, possibly three things that we want the administrators to go back and look at. One is the social studies teacher. The second is the study hall. And I'm not sure where we stand on the principal, but definitely I have heard from at least two people that 5% is too much. I also agree. Last year, Reedfield came very close to voting down the budget, the only town that did. But there was an effort with the reasoning, an effort to vote it down with the reasoning that every school budget that has been voted down in the state, they've gone back and have been able to cut. And there were big advertisements in the newspaper about that. I don't want that to happen this year. I've not heard of any type of movement, but that was a very late starter as far as that movement and advertising went. However, it moved fast. So are there other areas that we would like the administrators to go back and take a look at without taking any votes tonight, unless there's a clear path, but at least give guidance to the administrators as to where we want them to look? Adam?
Just last year, I think in the budget, we added summer groundskeeping positions. And I noticed this year we're upping the hours.
The length of the season, we want them for 3 months longer.
Is there some backstory, like did we just not mow the lawns? Were there
It's about mowing.
It's about mowing?
And the gardens, right.
Yeah,
The length of the mowing season, so.
yeah.
Are there other creative ways of getting that done that can be looked at? Yep, yeah.
So we have another major issue, and that is coming so fast. By the end of the year, you want to pass a bond. And I just been sitting here. I wish they would have put the amounts at the bottom of these pages for the school. But to get a bond, I think we need to really start thinking long-term than short-term. And that is, we need to have what Jeremy asked, what is the population of these schools and where they're headed as to when their school is finished. And if we don't have that, when we go for a long-term bond to build a structure, we're not going to have it, but it would give us more insight and more talking points, because there's so much money. Just take a look at it.
And I think we will have a better idea once we have had a chance to read the full report and to meet with the architects as to the life of our schools.
So that's going to happen soon.
We will be meeting with architects, yes,
Yeah.
next week. Yes, Adam?
Just talking about the high school study hall monitor, is there a way that we can, like put sub money in the budget, like a little extra? So like a couple of times a month, you can hire a substitute to just monitor study halls? I mean, is that a possibility rather than adding a new person with benefits and stuff? That was one of the times, because I'm assuming the teachers at Marina Cook are already meeting people with needs in these study halls. So I just don't know. That's something I'd like more info on.
I think we were asking for other creative ways of covering study halls, and for a report next time about that. And one idea would be subs and whatever else that they can come up with. Any other areas that you would like the administration to take a look at? Yes?
I'm wondering, when it comes to the equipment, can many of it be phased out throughout many years instead of just buying it in chunks? Can it just be slowly transitioned over a course of many years? So I was wondering if that's a process we could look into.
I'm not sure I understood.
Well, like for example, lockers. Instead of replacing all the lockers at once, we just go one hallway at a time over the course of 5 years, and use that example for other equipment as well.
Okay. Other areas that you would like the administration to take a look at?
The plowing. I noticed there's a plow truck, again, a truck with a plow on there. What is the situation? Because I have no idea. Do we plow our own driveways? No. So that's
to plow the entranceways.
Sorry.
The main part of the plowing for the parking lots and the road coming in here, or whatever, is hired out. We contract that out and we bid it out. But what's happening is now, especially where the fire marshal has changed the fact that all entrances have to be kept fully open before we can open school. It used to be the main entrances were open and we had 24 hours to get the rest of them open. Now they have to all be open before we can open up the doors. That can't be done with snow blowers. I mean, so those small, the entrances, the plow trucks, a plow truck can rotate around the district to help in the areas where, in the schools that can't get the snow blowing done in time.
And that's the same reason the mule is on the budget too?
No, the mule is used constantly up at this, it's used for the athletics, it's used for, and it's getting old. The mule is just getting old, and it must be 7 or 8 years old at least, and they put a lot of miles on that, and so that's why the mule is on there.
Other areas? I believe that's quite a few areas to look at between now and next week. So I feel that's the direction we need to go in, is to have the administrators look at these areas and come back with further recommendations. Yes, Jeremy?
I just wanted to make one quick comment. I don't necessarily disagree with needing to identify ways to trim the budget, but I don't want us to sit here around these tables and think that we have got it all figured out about what the electorate thinks is too much and isn't. So it's not as though 4.9% is acceptable and 5 isn't, or that 3.5 is and 3.6 isn't. So I hesitate to sort of say, well, but Reed Field came really close to, we have really no concept of exactly why people voted the way they did, because we've never done any research into it. So I think sort of assuming that we have all identified whatever this magic number is that is going to make people vote for it would be a little arrogant. So that's it. I'm not saying I disagree. In fact, I think I probably do think it should be below 5% and as low as we can get it. But I'm just not sure that we can sort of identify among ourselves in this room exactly what is driving people to support it or oppose it.
I agree, and whatever we go out with for a vote, we need to be able to justify. These are the things that we need in order to educate your children the best that we can, and that's our guiding principle, which is to be physically responsible, but to do what is best for the kids. So I don't have it memorized. I think you do. Our guiding principle for budget.
Oh, I don't have it memorized.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to add something.
Yes.
I just want to be clear, I'm not saying that's a golden number. I probably analyze votes more than most at this table. Maybe you and I are a little equal, Jeremy, but just as personal and as what I think is responsible and being a taxpayer, that's just kind of what I feel is the right number. I don't know. Maybe could pass today, no problem. I don't really know, but at some point, there's a breaking point when it never goes down. I don't see a budget going down, and at some point, there's got to be a breaking point, because the amount of money we get from the state goes up and down, and if the state has a bad year economically, and we have to cut 10%, that makes it difficult, so.
Adam?
Just my overall feeling on this budget is when we toured all the buildings, it wasn't, a lot of it was that furniture was getting old or kids were uncomfortable sitting in certain desks. It was just overall the facilities, and the teacher feedback we got wasn't a whole lot of, it doesn't, what that tour was doesn't reflect this budget. And that's the hard thing for me, is when we're looking at adding more staff members and we're looking at adding, but we're not going into the things that we can fix right away with the budget, as far as the desks that kids feel uncomfortable sitting in, as far as that's a hard thing. And I know I'm definitely not an expert, and I know the administration, I don't feel like there's any malfeasance or anything. I feel like they know they have the best interests ahead. I just wonder, help me to realize why those two things don't line up.
Question. I know that some things have been ordered now that have been taken off of this list, and these reductions reflect that. Has any furniture, any supplies, any books been purchased early through this year's money to cover some of these decreases?
Yes. Do you want to talk about the furniture?
I know the high school has ordered close to $20,000 in furniture this year already. They still have their furniture money in the budget for next year, which is $6,800. The other schools didn't budget as much furniture money for next year as the high school did, but because of the fact that our balance was fairly healthy because of the staffing changes and the fact that we received more tuition this year than we anticipated. The other schools have ordered the furniture that they had budgeted for next year out of this year. Also, I know special ed, the OWL curriculums for the preschools, some books are being ordered, AP books for high school. So there's quite a few things that we're ordering this year due to the fact that we had extra money this year that we're reducing out of next year's budget. So we're probably up to, I don't know, 20 or 30,000 right now. And we're also, because we had two major maintenance projects at the beginning of this year that we didn't budget for, I just broke my pen again. The diesel tank and the univentilators down at Manchester. We put a lot of projects on hold that were for this year, because you never know what you're going to run into in the wintertime for maintenance needs. So, knock on wood, let me find some wood. We're just about through, winter, and we've come through fairly well. So I think before next meeting, Donna and Sean Drinkwater and myself are going to meet, and we're going to look over things that might have been put off this year, and things that are in next year's budget, or maybe some of the things that have come off next year's budget, and see how much money we still have in his maintenance budget this year, and we're going to try to take care of some of those this year. And so, in essence, we should be able to reduce some more money out of his budget next year.
So some of the things that you see on this list that show as reductions to date are because they have been ordered. It's not that that they have been just cut and we're not going to do it. They have been taken out of next year's budget and purchased with money in this year's budget. David?
Would it be difficult to, to differentiate those, or to help those stand out on the list, so that we can look at it and say, oh, well, only half of them are new, or?
The most recent ones, I am putting notes next to them on the list that say purchasing fiscal year 18.
Thank you.
That would be very helpful. Yeah. Anything else Sean?
I guess the other thing I want to add, my position on the budget, is because thinking about future years, I mean, next year's, I know we're in this year's budget, but next year's budget, it's automatically going to go up because teachers are getting a raise, $150,000, $200,000, I think maybe $200,000. We're going to try to get a bond, so it's just kind of some of my thought process. So you're already talking in future years, the budget is going to I mean, if the bond passed, then staff are going to get raises because it's part of the contract, so that's kind of my thought process as well.
Alex?
The strategic planning meeting we had, when will we be able to see some of the results from it? Even just like short pictures of it.
So we have two people, Ryan Meserve is one of them, are working on their superintendent internships, and that is their project. The first piece of that is to come up with the executive summary, and they've started work on that already, and to come up with summarizing all of the information and coming up with about 4 goals that are very broad. And then next year with the new superintendent, they'll work on the specifics of the strategic plan. So that's the plan right now.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was an excellent way to get a good insight on what people are thinking. Community members from all the different towns. I think it was an excellent way to see what expectations they have for us. So I'd look forward to seeing it.
Okay. I think, is there any, I don't see any citizens out there. Oh, is there one back there hiding? I didn't even see you. I'm sorry. Do you have any comments? Okay. At this time, I think we've given the administrators quite a bit of things, quite a few things to take a look at and to come back to us with. At this time, I think.
So on the strategic plan, the public has no input from now until it's written. That doesn't sound good to me. Because the public pays the bills. And to have this as a secret society doesn't work, in my estimation.
Didn't they just have 2
We-
days?
We would, if we need to talk about the strategic plan at another time,
Right. But I'm just adding to what Alex was saying.
that
That's it.
would, we would need to have that as an agenda item. At this time, I think that we have gone through updates, we have deliberated, we have done a little bit of decision-making, we've asked questions, and we've had a lot of discussion. And so I would like that very much. All those in favor of adjournment? All right, see you next week.